welcome into another episode of the Young Terps podcast. Ahmed Kafir and Mason Viner. Ahmed, we talked about this stretch of games for the Terps on the basketball court for a while, and, well, back-to-back unexpected losses, and might as well cross off any chance of the NCAA tournament, barring a run in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think this was pretty much the nail in the coffin. Again, like you said, unless they manage to get hot in the Big Ten tournament, it's really hard to see Maryland kind of overcoming this. Kind of going into the week, they really had still an unappealing resume. I mean, again, only one quad one win so far, 2-2 in quad two games. Their biggest win against against Illinois, granted on the road, but without Terrence Shannon. And the next best win is arguably at UCLA. So losing to Rutgers, who with the win over Maryland, moved up to a quad two opponent now. I think at this point, unless Maryland goes undefeated, it's really hard to see it. So undoubtedly a disappointing finish, and not what many were expecting in year two of Kevin Willard.
No, not at all. Let's jump back to earlier in the week. Maryland falls at home to what's been a bad Rutgers team who did win at Wisconsin over the weekend, but they came into College Park and took it 56-53. And the Terps struggled everywhere, but really, even Jameer Young, an off night, he and Julian Reese combined for 35, but the Terps just can't get it done in the end.
Yeah, it was just, I think, kind of going into the matchup, I think a lot of people expected, probably an ugly offensive game and good defensive game, just kind of given what both teams did. But like you said, an uncharacteristic bad night from Jameer Young, finishing 3 of 17 from the field there. Still managed to figure out to land in double figures there. But again, it goes back to the same problems. When you mentioned Jameer and Julian Reese combining for 35 of Maryland's 53 points, the lack of production elsewhere continues to loom large. But again, that was a game that, maybe going into halftime, you still felt that, maybe it was going to be an ugly game, but Maryland was going to be able to figure out a way to pull it out. I think a lot of people just kind of had that gut feeling for Maryland when they're at home, but unfortunately, Rutgers took advantage in the second half and never looked back. I believe the final 15 minutes they led.
Yeah, and Rutgers, I mean, just much better field goal percentage shooting in the game. They go 21 for 56. The Terps only make 17 field goals the entire game. Maryland, once again, the 3-point shooting is just horrendous. I mean, 2 for 18 against Rutgers. The 3 that's jacked up by Dante Scott at the end, unable to make really anything happen down the stretch. Maryland was allowed back in the game by that technical foul that was suspect in itself that goes against Rutgers. Terps cut it all the way down to 1, but this year it's just been these one possession games coming down the stretch, not being able to design plays. It doesn't seem to matter whether Kevin Willard calls timeout, whether he doesn't call timeout. Maryland and their opponents, everybody knows the ball's going to Jameer Young. It's in this case, I was almost happy to see somebody else put that shot up, just because there's immediate doubles on Jameer Young, especially when Deshaun Harris-Smith is beyond the 3-point line. You almost don't have to guard him if you're being realistic to that. Juju Reese also not a threat from anywhere outside of 12 or 15 feet of the basket. You look around and up and down this roster, and it is really the same conversation you've heard all year from the two of us. Yeah. There's just nobody else to make that shot, and it's like a shame that Jahari Long isn't on the court in that situation rather than DHS. It popped up again against Ohio State, just because at least at Xfinity, he's somewhat of a threat to be able to step outside and make a shot.
Yeah, I was rewatching a little bit of the Rutgers game earlier today, and noticed that I believe it was 8-8 early, midway through the first half there, and there was a weird play where Jahari Long kind of looked like the ball kind of got saved. Maryland could have taken possession, stolen away from Rutgers. But again, I think kind of through conference play, he's probably been, arguably, I mean, not arguably at this point, just considering the bench production, but really the only dependable guy that you can turn to outside of that starting 5. So again, I think it's fitting. I think the Rutgers game was the start of defenses really starting to figure out Jameer Young, really starting to dial in on him. And Maryland really just, once again, like you said, just the same kind of conversation, but just kind of re-emphasized on Tuesday night. Maryland just doesn't have a dependable second scoring option outside of Jameer.
Yeah, and I brought up Jahari Long being that guy, and to look at his stat line, he's 0 for 5 in the game, or 0 for 4, 0 for 3 from 3. He knocks down 2 free throws, picks up a foul and an assist, and that's basically it for his stat line in major bench minutes. Kevin Willard shortening the bench. It was only Jamie Kaiser and Jahari Long and Caleb Swanton Roger that enters the game against Rutgers off the bench. But really, I mean, it's one of those things. At least DHS gives you a great defensive minutes. Jahari Long's defense has massively improved, but this team really needs somebody to score the basketball. And when it doesn't come from Jamie Kaiser and Jahari Long, there really is not another playable option other than when Matty Traore steps off the bench and gives the Terps 8 yesterday.
Yeah, that was a sight to see. But yeah, like you said, I think Tuesday's problems took us right into Saturdays, unfortunately.
Yeah, Maryland double overtime loss in Columbus against Ohio State, 79-75. Strange reading that off. I mean, there's nothing more Big Ten than a 2 overtime game only ending 79-75, but Maryland and Ohio State found a way to do that. Ahmed, the Terps, they led by double digits in the first half. That dwindled by the end, goes into a 1-point deficit. Maryland with chances to win both at the end of regulation, the end of the first overtime, and then ultimately unable to get a foul in with 6 seconds left on the clock after their last offensive possession. That led to a dunk that allowed bettors everywhere that bet Ohio State to celebrate the Buckeyes 2.5 as they win it by 4.
Yeah, again, it really felt like that was a game that Maryland just really felt slip away there. Was really able to kind of control the lead. Granted, Ohio State was able to come back a little bit, but again, just a really kind of a nail in the coffin there. And again, just the lack of offense and the closing minutes of both halves and the final, I think it's 2.5 minutes of both overtimes. Goes back to, again, what we just talked about in the Rutgers game and what we've seen really all year, just inconsistent offense. And then when you're really putting that much strain on your defense every possession, you're going to break. And unfortunately, I mean, it was a little bit of a bounce back game from Jameer Young there, finishing with, I believe, 8 of 22 from the field. But again, just the lack of production. And again, I really felt like Ohio State really honed in on Jameer yesterday. And I think a little bit surprising that we didn't see Jordan Geronimo at all.
Yeah, the Terps, not finding or not having Geronimo out there led to Matty Traore obviously getting more time. Caleb Swanton Roger also enters the game. But when you look at this one, the only thing that you have to stare at if you're a Maryland fan is the free throw shooting from the Terps, especially down the stretch. 2 huge misses from Dante Scott, 4 misses in 2 separate stints at the line for Juju Reese. Really stole the game from Maryland. I mean, when you look at it, you said it was game that Maryland let slip away. It's one that I look at and talk a lot about unforced errors all over sports. And this was just a game riddled with unforced errors from the Terps, who had multiple chances in both overtimes to take 2 possession leads. They get to the free throw line. They can't take the lead back at multiple times, can't extend it at others. And this one stings.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think this one was really the nail in the coffin. I mean, the Rutgers game, I think, was kind of, again, that was kind of, you weren't able to really come back from that. Very similar to how Maryland isn't able to come back from those early November non-conference losses. But again, I thought that this was a game for Maryland, especially on the road, to be able to get right. So to be able to see your fifth year forward missed 2 crucial free throws in the final minute, like you mentioned, and then Jameer Young, Julian Reese, just missed opportunities. But again, just kind of perfect picture of what this season has been for Maryland so far.
Yeah, and the Terps unable to really clamp down on the defensive end. Bruce Thornton has really solid game for the Buckeyes. He goes 10 for 20, picks up 24 points. But it felt like one of those games as it extended, you were just waiting for Maryland to do something to pull away. All those opportunities with the ball and the lead to extend it, and the ball never went in the basket. They never had that high screen dive look at the end, which they've been so successful with, getting Jameer Young free to the basket, getting Juju Reese a touch inside where he can get fouled or make a shot. But ultimately, those are the plays that have worked. And when Maryland needed something to happen, it felt like they were so afraid of Jameer Young getting in that double team situation 35 feet from the basket that they didn't really push the pressure towards the hoop. And you heard it on the broadcast multiple times as well. Maryland's in the bonus. They need to take advantage of these next, 4 minutes before Ohio State catches up foul wise. And for a minute or two, Maryland had that pressure going towards the basket, but you see the errors from DHS, Jameer Young at times, Jahari Long, driving to the basket and never there's no driving kick because nobody wants to put up a three on this team. No one's a threat to make that shot. So it's almost drive it until that triple team comes, ball gets stolen. And Ohio State, credit to them on their adjustments from Chris Holtman's staff just to break really, really hard going the other way. We saw it yet again from Maryland, not necessarily being able to recover going back on the defensive end after turnovers. And one thing piles into another. And on the road, you got to make those foul shots. You have to take those opportunities. Terps, I mean, you can almost consider it a gift. They probably got 6 or 7 really to put the game away between the end of regulation and overtime. And you don't take any of those, and you can't look at anybody but in the mirror with this one.
Yeah, again, I think that's kind of a perfect summary of it. And then again, I think Maddie, again, with the lineup switch, I thought, he looked well and or looked good in his limited minutes. A little bit surprising for a lot of Maryland fans, and then he didn't play the final 12 minutes of the second half. Didn't see him in either double overtimes. But again, you look at it's always going to start with your top dogs, and especially with the missed free throws. Again, it's just missed opportunity there. And again, just kind of going back to the lack of offense in either of the halves there. Again, Maryland needs to figure out a way to find something out of Jameer, and it'll be kind of interesting to see. Obviously, with I think the season kind of decided. Obviously, I think Maryland's going to have a chance in Big Ten tournament, like we mentioned at the start of the show. But it'll be interesting to see, how Willard, whether he adjusts and kind of gives Jimmy Kaiser, Deshaun Harris-Smith, John Lamoth, who drew feedback or drew good criticism from Willard a couple weeks ago. But we haven't seen him really since the conference play heat up. It'll be kind of interesting to see if we see any more tweaks to the rotation, to the lineup, to try and get some of these younger guys going a little bit.
Yeah, I was surprised that Traore didn't really get time in that stretch. I thought he played well. He moved through the offense well. He was kind of aggressive at certain times with the basketball, which really helped to have somebody down there. And, he also still looks a little bit uncomfortable playing the game, getting up and down the court. Defensively, it's not there. Didn't rebound that well in his time. But with Juju struggling the way he does, with Juju the way he plays now, because it seems like he's desperate to not foul out of the game, which is something that I take a bit of issue with when the game's in those moments where you can sell out to try and block a shot and you might get a foul called on you and foul out. That's the play. I mean, if he's the only big man out there, if Jordan Geronimo is not in the game to also defend the rim and Dante Scott's at the 4, or you're playing a 5 out almost at that point, you got to sell out eventually. Eventually that timer's got to go off in his head where I've got to commit to make the play. We need to stop the other team, or I at least have to make them make foul shots, whether I'm not going to be out there the rest of the time, especially in a double overtime situation. But credit to Traore, a guy who doesn't really get any minutes, averaging, I think it was like 0.6 points per game coming into it, to go out there and produce for Maryland, give them something offensively from that 4 spot and play the 5 in Big Ten play. All those minutes have been going to CSR. I like what Willard did with that. I think offensively it was a benefit to the team, but you mentioned it. Now it's about the rest of the way. Do we see, Noah Batchelor, you almost have to consider at some point. So are they trying to still evaluate there? I don't think there's much to, but is he going to get time? Is John Lamoth going to get time? Like what is going through Kevin Willard's head right now? Because he's certainly not really giving us the answer in those post-game press conferences or on the radio or anything like that of really what the personnel decisions are to this point.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. Post Ohio State was the first time in 3-4 weeks that we haven't heard anything about travel. So I guess that's one positive from Saturday. But again, like you mentioned, I think Batchelor will be kind of interesting. I think just kind of with everyone looking at him as a 3-point specialist coming in to Maryland, and that hasn't really come to fruition yet. So again, I don't know how much you can experiment there, but again, kind of give him a chance to impress the staff. That will be interesting. But again, I think the bigger the storyline the rest of the way will, what does the effort look like from a lot of these guys? And I think, again, Jameer Young and Dante, I think Jameer especially, they're looking to get to the pro level, obviously. So, how does that all mesh together? How does the locker room, how does that all come together? So I think that's going to be a much more interesting storyline to follow over the next 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, and I'll point this out too. It always feels like this team is one of those that you just feel like if there was more time, something would go right, just with the level that they're playing at on the defensive end. They have so many opportunities. I believe does that take them down to 1-6 or 1-7 in one possession games this season? It's like if they had one more guy, if they had, more time to figure something out. And at this point, that clock has kind of run all the way down. It's not seemingly it's not going to happen. They're not going to find the one guy who gets the hot hand. You're not going to get that, coast to coast runner to fall at the end of regulation. It just for some reason the ball is not bouncing in this team's favor. And this one's one that you almost put into the other category that if you just did the basic things, you would have won. But it's so like bothersome with this. Everybody wants to talk about Hakeem Hart and Ian Martinez, but I'll even put it out there. We're 14 baskets, 7 baskets, somewhere in that range away of having a completely different conversation right now with the same guys on the team, not with any hypotheticals applied to the situation. It's been disappointing. It's got to be disappointing that locker room now to know that time's really running out. It's going to be really interesting. I think a real test of what Maryland's got going forward, how certain guys, especially the young players that are going to be here next year, play out the rest of this season, and if they can find a way to steal a couple games and maybe have something going into the Big Ten tournament rather than just needing to go on some insane run from the 11 or 12 spot in the league.
Yeah, exactly that. I think again, Maryland will have a chance coming up with Iowa, Illinois coming to College Park to maybe salvage some respect. But we'll see. I don't think either of us are really expecting a crazy environment inside of Xfinity off the heels of just both this season and this past week. So we'll see. It's anyone's game now.
Yeah, I mean, you look at that Rutgers game the other night, a lot of empty seats out there. I'm interested. 8:30 on Valentine's Day. That'll be the new excuse. It was Valentine's Day. That's why nobody showed up to Xfinity. But with all that being said, and just the way the crowds have looked this year, it is going to be an ugly stretch for Maryland basketball. And it's goes with one, the quality of the opponents. It really isn't there this year in the conference. And two, fans are just checked out with this team. It's one of those, if the season ended tomorrow, I don't really know how many people would really expect to see much from the rest or really care at this point.
Yeah, I think at the vast majority, are just kind of looking for the season to be over at this point. From a fan perspective, I mean, there's nothing. It's not like it's an appealing style of basketball right now. It's Jameer Hero ball, and offensively they're challenged, and it's not like they have postseason aspirations right now. I mean, talking about a team that I wrote a week ago, I did it like a roundup. I think only one outlet had Maryland projected to have to host an NIT game. The other two had Maryland traveling, and then they lost at Rutgers and at Ohio State. So, I mean, this is it's pretty hard to kind of get up right now. So, yeah, I don't blame the apathy.
Yeah, let's flip it over to the football side with that. A lot brighter these days with Maryland football, Ahmed.
Yeah, I think obviously Mike Loxley and company, they did a really good job. And signing day was this past Wednesday. Was able to ink through the last three members of the 2024 class. So we had a nice little surprise on the third one.
Yeah, Dimitri Nichols commits to the Terps, flips from Auburn on signing day. Maryland digging into Florida again and picking up another piece of the defensive line.
Yeah, so this one defensive line was a big need for Maryland, obviously, and I think kind of going into, and I mentioned actually on the last episode, they, as of last episode, I no longer expected Maryland to look at the portal. And that was because there was potential target on the D line in the portal. There didn't really sound too serious, and then obviously did not materialize. So then it sounded like the efforts kind of reshifted there. Michigan State was involved with Nichols down the stretch as well. But the relationship between Brian Williams and Nichols, that helped a lot there. Nichols, he had previously been on campus before, so there wasn't a complete lack of unfamiliarity there. Again, that relationship between Nichols and Brian Williams, that loomed large. And then again, Maryland had that need at the position, so it kind of all kind of came to fruition. Really sounded like it was, the last maybe 36 hours. But I was told Tuesday, he gave the staff his commitment Tuesday night, and then Wednesday morning it was 100% done deal. Went on to announce at 9 a.m. that day, and yeah, that's a big win. Obviously, with Nichols, Kevin Humes, Smart, McIntosh, kind of addresses a lot of your biggest and looming needs on the defense side of the ball.
Yeah, Terps wrap up this class ranking 31st from rivals and 44th from on three. Ahmed, not Loxley's biggest like numbers that he's put up, but we've talked about this a couple times, top to bottom. There's nobody that you really stare at and you're like, that's a take for Maryland. It's really a solid class that will be another foundational building block for locks.
Yeah, again, I think that this class, really from top to bottom, just really addressed needs. I think Ben Page actually commented on I did a poll grading the class, and Ben Page was the one to really highlight that this was a foundational class, which is 100% true. I mean, you look at the offensive line, look at these guys in 2-3 years. Shamar McIntosh, I think, is a guy who isn't going to come in right away and make an impact, but I could see him, being a Glenn Miller type in year 2 or year 3, year 4. So I think there's a lot of these guys that when all is said and done, a lot of these guys are going to be able to materialize. And then again, the offensive line, that was the area they really needed to just rebeef and retool. And, every Maryland fan, I mean, we can all look back in our memories and look back and remember when Maryland first made that transition to the Big Ten. And, we all remembered it starts in the trenches. And, Maryland's kind of at that point where you just got to rebuild, got to develop so that every year you're not going in and you don't need to get, at least 2, probably 3, possibly even 4 portal offensive linemen to start for the upcoming season. So I'm a big fan of this class from top to bottom. Again, I think that this is the most complete class to date. And I think I've said it probably 3 times on this show, but I'll say it again, 2025. I think Mike Locksley and company have a chance to go out with a bang.
Yeah, and the Terps hard at work already on those 2025s. Ahmed always with the coverage over on Inside the Black and Gold with what Locks has cooking for 2025, and DMV just with another great class. And it's Maryland's time, NIL wise. It seems like things are rolling, and the Terps are there to compete not only on the field, but they're continuing through the NIL era, battling it out on the recruiting trail as well.
Yeah, again, and I think that just really all boils down to Maryland's need to just lock down this talent, the long list of talent, defensively, especially the defensive backs, Malik Washington, who is probably the most complete quarterback to come out of this area since Caleb Williams. I wouldn't say he's a Caleb Williams level talent, but he's going to really do some damage at the college level. So just a lot of these guys that are really can be impactful cornerstone pieces. So I think that this is really that time where Mike Locksley, maybe in 2021, that class, a lot of fans look at and they say, oh, that was a class that, all the glitz and glory, and then it all fizzled out. But I think that this class, Maryland's really put a premium on recruiting the right type of guys. If you're an NIL guy first, your time on Maryland's board, and maybe your interest in Maryland is probably, going to be very short-lived. But I think really make sure they're getting the right type of guys. And I think they have a long list of the right type of guys in their backyard. And it really feels like it's all coming together. So we'll see, but it feels like Azar is coming up with everyone. A lot of these coaches are doing a really good job just keeping up and saying local, keeping up on local ties. And, got 5 stars coming back on campus through January. So it's been a momentum building month for sure.
Yeah, it sure has. And Ahmed, of course, with all that coverage over on Inside the Black and Gold. Ahmed, anything else to add on the pod today?
No, should be good. We'll see what staff changes come this week. I know it's been everyone's kind of waiting on that. It's just kind of wait and see on that for now. But until then, Mike Locksley, save us.
Amen to that.
Yeah, I'm not lying.
Yeah, that's where we are. That is where we are. It is. What is today? February 11th, Super Bowl Sunday, and we're saying Mike Locksley save us. That I think that tells you all you need to know. So
it's true. I said it on the board. Mike Locksley is probably the best thing about Maryland athletics, and it's becoming less of a hot take with each passing day. I don't think that's a hot take anymore. So we shall see.
All right. Well, as always, make sure to subscribe to this pod where you get it. Give it a thumbs up where you can, or drop a review for us. Really helps us out over here. Until next time, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.